Okay, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having an amazing day. Thank you for tuning in. This is another live stream on cybersecurity for the Cybersecurity Month in the month of October. Today, we will be looking at online searches. So, we will be understanding and evaluating online searches. However, before we start, I'm just going to present myself very quickly. My name is Gabriel. I am a student at the University of Ottawa. I am in my fourth year in computer science. And I also work in engineering outreach. My job is to prepare and present workshops to schools and to students from kindergarten all the way to grade 12. And also, since it's Cybersecurity Month, we are doing a live stream every Wednesday in both English and in French. The English session starts at 9:30 and the French session starts back at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So our program is mostly like 100% of the time STEM related. So we when we go out and we present workshops, they're all STEM related. Now we all know what STEM is, I hope so. So science, technology, engineering, and math. Today we will be looking more at the technological side, obviously with the cybersecurity. So before I get started, I just want to ask a question. Who can tell me what's the difference between a scientist and an engineer? So take a moment, think about it. What is a scientist? What is an engineer? And how are these different? And they have stuff in common. What is it? So actually, you could take a moment here if you want to pause the video and figure out the answer, and then tune back in to know what the answer is. So basically, a scientist is a curious person that has a question on his mind, right? So, for example, we all know the story of this famous scientist was sitting that was sitting under an apple tree and had an apple fall on his head. And the name of that scientist is, you probably guessed it, Isaac Newton. So an apple fell on his head. Now, I don't think that's how exactly it went down after the apple fell on his head, but let's just assume it. Let's make it simple for the sake of the live stream. So an apple fell on his head, and he wondered, why did the apple fall on my head, right? So some people just wonder and leave it. Others actually want to know, and that's where the discovery and all the research happens, right? So we do a lot of research. If there's any experiments that we need to run, we also run those experiments, and then through that, we get results. And then by evaluating those results, we look back at our initial hypotheses and we try to see whether that makes sense or not. Or we try to come up with a conclusion, and that conclusion is called then a theory. On the other hand, what an engineer does, in very simple terms, um, he takes what the scientist discovers, and by the way, I want to say discovers and not creates, because that thing has been there. It was just a matter of time until someone learned about it, right? So the engineer takes what the scientist discovered. He takes his theory and then utilizes that to, in order to do something that is to create or to come up with something, to build something that is useful. Um, Very good example of that is we all know that rockets fly because of the fire that happens on the bottom of it. Well, that's one of the factors, right? It goes up to space because of the fire that happens at the bottom of it, and that fire is so strong that it pushes the rocket to space. Okay, what is the whole idea of the fire? So the fire thing is actually called combustion. So a scientist discovered combustion, and then an engineer looked at that and said, "What if I can use this?" Right? And then all the cars that we use right now that are fuel-based cars or that are gas-based cars, all of the engines for those cars run on combustion, right? There's this micro explosions that happen in the cylinders within the engine that make the car run. Same thing when it comes to rockets. However, you can imagine how the explosion is much, much bigger, obviously, because there's the fire coming out. Whereas if you look at the car, it's a smaller explosion because there's not actually any like fire coming out. So it's there are micro explosions that happen in the pistons inside the cylinders of the engine. Um, that's pretty much it for what is a scientist and what is an engineer. So in case you weren't close or in case you were close, then congratulations. So what we are going to be looking at today is online searches. Again, we are going to be understanding and evaluating those, right? So I've prepared a PowerPoint. There's a PowerPoint that we have prepared, and we're just gonna go over. This is gonna be a quick and simple one, but I highly, highly encourage you that during or after the activity, you go and you try to evaluate some websites yourself because it could be a fun way. Uh, it is like this is somewhat of a lecture that is made in a fun way and an easy way, but obviously the sole purpose of it is to protect you online, right? Because we could go on so many of these websites that are shady, and we can, if we misclick a button here, if we click on a link there, it could potentially cause harm to our laptop and then obviously theft of personal information or access to our network. We do not want that. That's something bad, right? So whether you're a young person that's watching this, you could benefit from this and try not to do the bad stuff that we're gonna mention, or just only try to stick to the good stuff that we're gonna mention. Whether you're a parent, you could also use this for yourself if you did not know, or you could use it to educate your children, right? So let's get into it. All right, so understanding and evaluating online searches. This is for the cybersecurity month. So, second, there we go. Okay, so what is an engine? What is a search engine? So, when we are online, right, and we want to look up something, whether it's a recipe or the score for the Blue Jays team or for the baseball league, what's happening now, because I know that's like apparently booming right now. We all tend to go on Google. Google tends to be like the most popular backup for us when in this case or whenever we want to find out something, and then we just look it up there, right? Google is called a search engine. It is a tool on the internet, and its sole purpose is to help us find information. So it's basically a imagine like a big database, right? And there's information that has been entered, and we go into that database, and based on that, whatever's inside of it, once it's related to what we type in the search box, we kind of get answers, right? So we go in, we type something in the search box. Google looks at the search box through its algorithms and then takes your question and then returns to you whatever makes the most sense to that question, right? So again, Google is one of the most popular search engines, and then what happens is whenever we type, it tries to match what we're looking for. How does it decide to do that though? And this happens through what we call a search algorithm. So a search algorithm, we all know what an algorithm is. A search algorithm is basically a set of rules, right? And it basically tells the search engine that you need to follow these criterias in order to know what to return to the user, and not only what to return, in what order do you return them, right? That's why we see, for example, the more popular websites at the top. For example, if you're looking for, let's say, for example, you look for high rated restaurants, right? They're not going to give you any three-star rated restaurants. They're going to be basically filtering it to be four-star and above. Unless you really, really, really scroll down and the list of restaurants is sorted, it's until like you really go down until you find a restaurant that's maybe under four stars in your area as well, right? So again, a search algorithm is basically just a few rules that a search engine follows to decide what websites it should show you and also in what order. So the algorithm tries to evaluate many stuff, some of which are the words that are used on the website. So those words, they're gonna see if it's matched with your search engine, right? With your search keywords. So, for example, maybe not the website itself, but let's go back to the restaurant's idea. Let's say we were trying to look for a hamburger spot in in Byward, in the Byward Market in Ottawa. It's gonna show us first burger spots that are actually in Byward. That being said, it's not gonna show us pasta spots in Byward before it shows us burger spots in Byward. And also, it's not gonna show us burger spots outside of Byward before it shows us burger spots in Byward. So we have two conditions, right? The words that are the words that are being used are super important. So we have we have the we have first the type of food that we're looking for and then the location. And what this does is basically it filters it, right? Because it's different than if you just write food. If you write food and if you write burger spots in Byward, Ottawa, the when you write burger spots in Byward, Ottawa, it's gonna be more narrowed down, obviously. And that's basically what's gonna happen. So it's gonna take burger, it's gonna take the keyword. So we have burger and then we have Byward Market, Ottawa. So we have based on relevance, right? You don't want to get something that's irrelevant. Again, if you're looking for a burger spot, you don't want to get a pizza spot. That doesn't make any sense. So we have the words on the website. We try to match those with whatever you type in. Well, the algorithm does that. And we also have how many people visit the website. And this is where it comes to popularity, right? So a website that just opened is not likely gonna show up. It's not gonna likely show up um, above a website or before a website that is popular, right? So unless obviously there has been a lot of money paid, and this is also what boosts visibility for websites. But how many people visit the website? Obviously, if you search anything on Google, it is sorted in what is more popular, right? Which is why if you, for example, look burgers around you, there's a high chance you're getting a McDonald's out there. Although it's not the very best, there's a high chance you're gonna get McDonald's. Why? Because it is definitely one of the most popular, if not the most popular, burger spot around, right? Everyone gets McDonald's. So it's based on popularity. So many people go to McDonald's, so many people visit the McDonald's website to do deliveries or online orders. And also whether other websites link to it. So basically, in this case, if you look up Facebook, you might also get Instagram. And that is because they all make part of the Meta chain, right? So they're all under the same mother company, Meta, and based on those, it basically sorts out what it should give you. And finally, the goal of the algorithm is to find the results that are most helpful and match what you typed. So it all goes back to what is the most relevant. Like the results have to be the most relevant to what you typed in, right? Again, if you wrote that you wanted a burger, you should not be getting a pizza. At least not in your top results, right? If you want to get a pizza, that's probably when 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 there's no more burger only restaurants and it just so happens that there's a pizza restaurant or a pasta restaurant that also serves burgers. That's when I would imagine that a burger restaurant, well, that a pasta restaurant appears. But yeah, that's basically what a search algorithm is. Now, what does popularity mean? So, when we're talking about Google searches, popularity basically means how many times has a website been visited or shared, right? So these websites appear near the top of your search always. And but also we should keep in mind, not because something is popular, it means that it is a trustworthy source. So if websites are easy to read and they're fun, that could make them popular, but that has nothing to do with how accurate the information that's on there is. It could be a very easy to use, it could be a very fun website, but the information on there is fake, right? And an example that I'm pretty sure that you guys can relate in is in social media, for example, popularity is based on how many people watch the video, for example, on TikTok, how many people like the video, how many people share the video, right? So you see these videos with hundreds of thousands of likes. And even then, we need to keep in mind that not because this video is popular or not because this certain creator is popular, that means that what he's saying is true, right? So we shouldn't believe everything on the internet. There is there's trustworthy sources, and there's also what we're going to see next, which is what's called reliable websites. There's an idea of reliability behind everything. So even again, not because just something is popular, therefore it is right. That is not true, right? And that could cause us to fall into mistakes, right? Whether it's online or not online. So here we talk about reliability. So what does reliability mean? Same way a car is reliable, Toyotas, for example, they're super reliable cars. And what does that mean? It basically means that you turn it on, you can trust that it will start, no matter how long you've had it, right? If its range has been at if it's been working for 100,000 kilometers plus, for the most part, if you turn on a Toyota, it is gonna run. Um, on the other hand, you can get a Range Rover that will turn on, but it is also more likely to break, right? And sometimes now, it's more serious when it comes to websites. In websites, reliability means more than popularity, right? So we want a website to be super reliable. So what does reliability mean? It can be trusted, just like when the information on the website can be trusted. Just like when you turn on the Toyota and you trust that it's gonna turn on. And so basically, reliable sources are written by experts, and these experts they use facts, and they check their information carefully. So basically, it's like a government website, or or a university website, or a research um, websites that are strictly made for research, where people publish their papers. For example, university websites, when it's uploading course related information, it's not going to give you false information. At least you can trust that it's not going to give you false information. If you're enrolling for your classes, and let's say you have a math class at 8:30, you're not going to say, oh, that's a lie, it's probably at 10, but they're just putting it at 8:30. No. Or for example, if there's a government agency that, I don't know, talks about interest rates or whatnot, they're not going to give you a false number, right? They're not going to tell you that the interest rate is 5% for, I don't know, certain something, and then you go there and you see that it's 2%. That doesn't make sense, right? This is because everything that's on these websites are fact based. And this is different than, for example, a blog written by a random person. A very good example would be Reddit. So Reddit is it's not a social media app. It's kind of like Twitter, where people go in and write stuff. It's a blog post basically. So people go in and write in different groups about whatever they want, right? And obviously, if it's a person that's just bored in their house, or like that is not even like not to judge or to put or to shame them, or to maybe if it's someone that's just sharing their opinion, right? Because we have opinions out there, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. So the university websites, the government agency, the research based websites, those are based on facts, right? So that's Just a slight difference right there. How do we know if a website is reliable? What I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna move my image out of the way just to make it easier to read. There you go. Okay. So how do we know if a website is reliable? So usually from scholarly articles. So scholarly articles are texts that are written by respected authors. Sorry, scholarly articles are are just articles that are published on a scholarly website. These articles are like these are the kind of articles that also, well, it basically, they're similar to the other websites that we're gonna list right here, but they have the author that wrote them is reliable and is respected, and there's cited sources, so this is something that we can trust, right? And if you look, also texts written by respected authors. So if we see an author that published a text and, well, they're super respected, obviously we can kind of assume that what they wrote is somewhat true, right? Or at least it's not entirely fake. Reputable news websites. Now, if we follow the news websites are most likely, well, some reputable ones are won't be sharing any bad information on there. Personal blogs, discussion forums, and advice columns are not typically reliable sources. Again, Reddit. Reddit is a big example of this. So many people go on Reddit and they base themselves on whatever someone else wrote. This is not super reliable, right? Now, if it's just about, just sharing your opinions and stuff like that, obviously they're super nice. They're discussion forums, right? They're made for that. But you shouldn't basically take whatever's on there and live by it. Also, reliable websites are usually websites that are connected to the government, educational institution, or nonprofit organizations. Again, we spoke about that. Government agency websites are websites that are connected to the government. They're not going to publish any fake information. Educational institutions, such as the website of the University of Ottawa, they're not going to publish fake enrollment dates, right? Or fake tuition fees and then charge you more. And we have, for example, also fact-checked news sources that come from the Associated Press or the Washington Post. These are considered reliable news sources, reputable news sources. And we have the URL. URL is basically the link, right? And if the link ends in edu, gov, or org. This activity is mainly focused on how to protect yourself online from information, right? More than hacks, information. This is really what we're talking about here. And also does not seem to have a clickbait title, basically. So, again, how do we know if a website is reliable? Has the author clearly listed, cites its sources, and does not have an opinion stated in the title or the heading? So let's do a small practice. So we have two practices. We're gonna start with the first one. And here, you guys can take a minute and pause the video. And I'm gonna move my picture out of the way again. Oops. Okay. So you guys can pause the video here and try to think about it, right? And also go back in the video, in our video, that and try to look at what makes a website reliable and try to evaluate which of these websites seem to be reliable. So look at the title, look at the description, look at the link. The link is super important, the URL, obviously, because the extension .gov, .edu, .this, .that. And also think about these websites, right? So pause the video now, go back and try to figure it out. Okay, so without even opening the websites, right? So you guys obviously are, you can open the websites if you want. If you want to look them up, obviously the links are there, and if you want to open them. But obviously, if you type what are wind turbines, you might get slightly different, just because the time of when these were published and like when the slides were made are a bit different. But just try it. Go give it a time. Go give it a try. But we can see .gov are probably the most reliable websites, right? Because if we look at the others, they're not they're not um, so they're not educational institutions, but there are government websites. There's two government websites. So these are going to be up there. So the Department of Energy, this is a government agency website, and the NREL, this is also a government agency. So we can definitely and confidently place those up top. Wikipedia, on the other hand, is not a reliable source. This is something that people learn the hard way. Why is Wikipedia not a reliable source? Because who writes the information on Wikipedia? People write the information on Wikipedia, and it's not Wikipedia like does not super duper fact check everything that has been on there before it's been published, right? So there is a chance that we might get some false information on there. And the third and fourth website, we cannot really determine just by looking at them from the outside. These are actually websites where we have to kind of, oops, sorry, where we actually kind of have to go in ourselves to kind of find out, right? So there, when we go in, we can try to look and see, is an author being cited? Are there sources being cited? What are we talking about? Is it clickbait? Is it not clickbait? So this is basically we kind of have to run a second investigation on the third and fourth website by going literally through the link, right? Okay, so yeah. Okay, so if you open these websites, which I also encourage you, you will find out that these websites are not a clickbait title. So what's the title? Like wind turbine, what it is, parts and working. It's not a clickbait title. How does a wind turbine work? It's not a clickbait title, right? So you go in and you see that it evaluates, or basically it responds to what the search, to what the title is, right? Wind turbine, what is like? How does a wind turbine work? They actually talk about how a wind turbine works, and obviously you can take the link, which is right there, and go check for yourself, and you will also see. But however, they have no authors listed and no sources listed. Now, if you were running a small research for a school project, let's say on wind turbines, after you read this, even though the information might seem nice or interesting or whatnot, you should probably fact check those, right? Because we don't know if they came from a reliable source. We don't know if the author that wrote them is respected. We just know that it's on there. So it is always a good idea to fact check. Just run a quick fact check before we, you know, reuse um, these information, and we fact check those with other reliable sources. So basically, if we were to rank them, the government websites would go up top, and obviously because they're government agency websites, we consider them to be highly reliable. The second in silver, we have the National Grid Group and the Enel Green Power. The reason is, okay, they're not clickbait. They do talk about how a wind turbine works and the parts and how it works and all that, but they're missing authors, they're missing sources, right? And this is crucial. And the third one is Wikipedia, and we said why, right? Because it's not really checked. People just write stuff on there, and it's not good, right? So a lot of the information on Wikipedia is not true, which is why, like, I don't know for you guys, but for me, when we used to do high school projects, they used to try to prevent us from using Wikipedia. And obviously, it's for a reason. So, again, now, since we looked at the first website, um, how about we try to do this one? So, I'm just gonna try to lift the screen up here a bit, just so that, whoops, my bad. Just so that you guys can try to see. There we go. I'm gonna move myself out of the image. Okay. So if we look at these websites, again, this is the same exercise. How do we know if they are reliable, right? So how do we check if those websites are reliable? So again, if you wanna, yeah, so out of these results, which is the most and least reliable? So if you guys wanna pause the video again, go back to what we did just now, kind of the small brainstorm. Also go back to the um, the small explanation on reliable websites and come back to this and try to evaluate them yourself. Also open them on your Google browser and try to go through them yourself because sometimes you cannot tell just from the outside. You actually have to go in the website itself to be able to tell. And again, here we are talking about what are primary colors. So that's what we search, right? Okay. So we're gonna check. Our checklist is it's not a known source, doesn't have an edu, gov, or org, has a clickbait title, authors and publication date are clearly listed, no cited sources. So this is like a small checklist that we're gonna write. So this is for the first one, right? So this is the checklist that we have for it. So unknown source, not an edu or gov or org, has a clickbait title, and authors and publication date are clearly listed, but they have no cited sources. So primary colors are red, yellow, and blue, right? Not exactly. It doesn't really. Okay, for example, if you look at the Crayola website, right? They say what are the primary colors? The and when we look at this, primary colors are red, yellow, and blue, right? Not exactly. So it's kind of like playing on our emotions a bit. So this is definitely a clickbait title right there. So this is the checklist for the first website. For the second website, the BBC website, obviously BBC is a known news source. And it's a .co.uk, which is what the commercial entities in the United Kingdom use as extension, right? So co for commercial and UK for United Kingdom. It doesn't have a clickbait title, primary colors, color, and it just says National 5 Art and Design Revision. So there's no clickbait in it. However, the authors and the publication date are not listed and there is no cited source. So the only thing that might make this reliable is the fact that it comes from the BBC News outlet. Next up, we have Crayola. Crayola is a known source, obviously, because well, they create, color pencils, color related stuff. That's what Crayola is as a company. So it's a known source, however, it's not an edu, gov, or org, but it does not have a clickbait title. Authors and publication date are also not listed, and there's no cited sources. Now, here it's for us to judge whether we really trust a worldwide color company or we don't. But in this case here, since we have five websites, we're basically comparing the five, and then based on that, we're evaluating. Again, we have a .co.uk. So primary colors, what they are and why they're important. Again, not a clickbait title. It is a blog website, however. We talked about blog websites. It's a website where people go to share their opinions. Again, it's a .co.uk. Does not have a clickbait title. Authors and publication date are listed, obviously because it's a blog post, but there's no cited sources. And finally, we have cote noire. Okay. Primary colors of light and pigment. So again, not a clickbait title. It is a known source. It's not an edu, gov, or org. Authors and publication date are not listed. It has cited sources. But the thing is, it's like if you go in and you read, it doesn't answer the question that we're asking. Doesn't answer it, right? So what are primary colors? This website popped up out of the five that we have, and one of those five doesn't really evaluate what we're looking for. If we were to rank them, BBC goes up top, pixartprinting.co.uk goes in second, Crayola goes in third, How Stuff Works goes in fourth, and Le Cote Noir goes in fifth. Obviously, um, what brought How Stuff Works down, for example, is definitely that the title is clickbait. What brought BBC up is that it's it's a very known, it's one of the biggest news outlets in the world. Pixart.co.uk, authors and publication date are cited. This I think it's a bit up for debate for this one, whether it should be up there or not. Personally, I would put Crayola over it again. So, but that's basically it, right? This is again super tight, and Leil Kotmach is definitely gonna go in the end just because it didn't like it could be a reliable source, right? But here we're ranking the Google searches. It did not like it didn't really evaluate what we're looking at. So it's ranking it here is somewhat irrelevant. So just a reminder: don't believe everything that is uh, written online. Don't believe everything that you read online. Make sure it comes from a reliable source you can use, kind of like the small like checklist that we used while evaluating these websites. Make sure that it's a reliable website before trusting any of the information that they are giving you. And go back here. Again, do not trust everything that you see online, whether it's on Google searches or like search engines. Also on TikTok, that's probably where the biggest amount of misinformation comes from. TikTok, Instagram, all of those. Stay safe out there. There's a lot of false information that could be posted, and those information could either harm someone or maybe, unfortunately, God forbid, also harm yourself. So stay safe out there. Be careful at what you're looking at. Don't trust everything that you see. Run the small checklist that we talked about just to kind of determine whether a website can sort of be more trusted than others. Right? Thank you so much for tuning in and see you next Wednesday for another